Welcome back to Connections in Flight. I'm Erika Paramore.
I'm Sarah Mizuguchi.
Join us as we have another meaningful conversation about navigating our current life flight. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good. I'm quite well today. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Been busy.
Really?
With this podcast stuff. It's a new flight for sure, but it's exciting. I'm having so much fun with you. So anything in your carry-on bag that specifically excites you?
Well, I have a new prescription in my carry-on bag.
Oh, are we allowed to reveal?
Oh, I don't see why not. Okay, so last week at work, I thought I was acutely dying of low thyroid.
I had no idea.
I don't have low thyroid, it turns out, but I thought I
good.
did because I can be a hypochondriac. We can talk about that sometime. But I was at work and I was so freezing and tired, I guess I should say. But I was freezing tired. I was like having this week where I just could not function. So then I thought, well, I acutely think of like I'm dying. There's something massively wrong. And then hypothyroid does run in my family. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go and get all my blood. Haven't been to the doctor in probably 2 years. I made an appointment. I saw her this week. She was, going over all my labs, which are all completely normal. And then she was like, well, is there anything else? And I was like, you know what? There is. I have like zits. Like I have more zits than my teenager boys.
That happened to me too.
And I didn't actually specifically go to the doctor for the zits because I just, like I said, I thought I had something massively wrong in my blood. Because I've had low vitamin D before because I'm inside so much.
Year or two.
So then after I found out everything was normal, and I was like, oh, what about my zits? So I'm on spironolactone. That's in my bag.
What is that?
It's a receptor antagonist for androgen, which is a hormone. I guess it's a thing.
Well, it's like I got back on the birth control pill again, that low estrogen thing, because I was like, there's nothing worse than having wrinkles and pimples.
No.
Like, that is not fair.
I gotta tell you, I remember hearing other women say this when I wasn't having this problem yet. I'm not gonna say I'm okay with the wrinkles, but I'm way not okay with the zits.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I came to the doctor. So I hate being on like a daily medicine. I only had to do it a couple of times in my life, but I was to the point where I was just like, you know what, there is something else. What can we do about these zits? So she, was like, well, you want to try spironolactone? And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I do.
Just to see. So how long are you on it for?
I just started. That was what I did this week. It was one of the things I did. So I just got it. I think I've been on it 4 days. So I haven't seen anything massively crazy yet.
Well, I don't see any zits, so something's working. But I never have. But that's interesting. That's good for us to kind of stay on top of. We'll check it back in.
But it kind of took me back to like, I can't only imagine how much money on like acne medicine. And it's not like I have crazy acne, but just these zits. And I started thinking, oh my God, why had I never asked like an actual professional about this before? And I was thinking, oh my God, so I'm taking this spironolactone, it's working more from the inside out.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, it's just like the podcast. Like all this shit that I do that might be more passive just for outside.
Yeah.
When really the work is on the inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like tackling psychology and zits.
Well, and gut
from the
health.
inside out.
Also,
gut health.
I mean, the serotonin in your gut, the stress, it all happens.
Right.
And I think it's also about trusting a doctor to hear you.
Oh, I totally trust my doctor.
And that's so important. Not to just have them write a script, but like really hear what you're saying and who you are and what you've tried. And I think that's wonderful. You have somebody that can really.
Well, I think everyone
journey.
should have a primary care doctor that they can trust. I mean, they are the gatekeepers of everything, and they're invaluable. Well, so yeah, that's what's in my bag of medicine.
Again, well, I'm so excited. We have a really special guest today. Caroline Burckle is an Olympic medalist, entrepreneur, and artist. She's born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. She became a competitive swimmer early in her life. She went on to the University of Florida on a swimming scholarship and became an NCAA champion before making the Beijing Olympics. She says that when she retired from the sport, her real inner work began, which is why I think it'll be great to talk to her today. She went on to get her master's in sports psychology from the University of Tennessee and her Associate of Arts in Merchandise Product Development in LA. She currently lives in California and is on a sabbatical after running her successful youth athlete mentoring company alongside her Olympic teammate, Rebecca Soni, which is called Rise Athletes.
That is a very impressive bio. I cannot wait to talk to Caroline. Did Caroline pick the word of the day?
She did, her word being pain, Pain. So I have no idea the context, which is always fun to let it unfold as we talk.
I think everybody thinks about their word of the day quite.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of choices out there.
I mean, I've thought about if I had a word of the day or word of the episode. I mean, it takes a lot of thought, especially to condense your whole kind of story down to that. So, well, that's a heavy word. I can't wait to hear all about Caroline.
Me too. Well, Caroline, we're still looking forward to this conversation with you on Connections in Flight. I had the privilege of meeting Caroline, I don't know exactly what year that was. And now, how many years later, you're 37. And I am just curious kind of how you're feeling about your current course of flight. How are you doing?
Yeah, I think I worked with you when I was, early 20s, I think.
Wow.
It feels like yesterday, but also a really long time ago. It's nice to come full circle and be able to have this conversation.
Do you mind, just since I haven't had the pleasure of knowing you, do you mind to just give me a little bit of background about where you grew up and where we got to with the Olympics?
Yeah, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I was born and raised there. I went to college at the University of Florida. And then after that, I went and trained out in California for a little bit. I'm a swimmer. And then I moved back to Louisville, and that's that 2010 to 2012 timeframe. So, Louisville, Kentucky native, and have kind of been all over since.
If you think about like that time when you were 20, right? Would you have picked the word pain then if you were doing an interview?
No, I don't think so. I honestly, I just reflect on even coming into this conversation, and I was thinking about all the different phases of life that I've been through, from being a young girl competing to going to the Olympics, and then my experiences there, and then afterward, my experiences then. And I think I wouldn't have ever been able to pinpoint any word for my experience back in that time. Like, it would have been too difficult because I was so immersed. Like, everything felt so fast and so rushed, and so like, you need to heal and you need to fix this and you need to do this. And so nothing was ever settled. So I wouldn't have ever been able, I think, to even think of a word. And maybe you can even answer that, like, even just working with you, it's like, I don't even know that I could have pinpointed how I felt, other than just this emotional upheaval of everything that was just a big pot of stew of all these different things that I felt, and couldn't ever really pinpoint that.
Also, like, as a 20-year-old, you were such a success so young. I imagine that you arrived at 20 and your body even knows more than your head. Going is winning. What's next? Like, that motion, the force is what made you who you are as an athlete. If we're not Olympic athletes at 20, we're still lost. I mean, I think we're all kind of figuring out those different parts of ourselves going into adulthood. It's a very complicated time.
And can I just clear something up for myself? And were you Erika's client? Erika was your therapist?
Yes.
After the Olympics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I know.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's when you said the real work began, correct?
Yeah, totally. And that was actually, I mean, it was such an important time in my life.
Oh my gosh.
I had never truly felt like understood at all until I worked with her. And it was like this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, like, I'm actually a human being. So many athletes feel this, like Erika said, you're achieving and you're doing, and you're just, we're all on this path of like, we think that there's this finish line and that there's this place to be and all these things to achieve and accomplish. And not just athletes, but human beings, whether it's you're going to school and getting degrees, or you're, trying to become a doctor, or trying to become a chef, or whatever you're trying to do, there's always this mental destination. And I think I lived in that space for so long, and it was such a sympathetic fight or flight, like, must do, must achieve, must be, must accomplish, And that's just a product of that environment that you are in. And it gets you where you want to be, of course, with your goal, with whatever it is, but it doesn't necessarily translate very well after you're finished with whatever that is, because it teaches you that nothing is ever enough, that whatever destination you get to is never going to be the most amazing thing. There's always more.
Yeah. Well, and Caroline, what you're saying is so true with the word safety is like what comes to mind. Like you listening to exactly what a coach wanted you to do, or have a conversation about what you needed with a coach to achieve. And then you're done with that and you have to listen to your own voice. I imagine that was terrifying. How do I trust if someone's not telling me exactly what to do and how to do it? I mean, whether I work with musicians or athletes at really young ages, when they get out into the real world, that is a big question of like, is it safe for me to trust my own, like not just thoughts, but like my body and my gut and my emotions? Was that challenging for you? And for how did you work through that?
Nothing felt safe. I do remember that. I didn't know where to go to find that refuge of, who am I? What is my purpose? What's my body supposed to do now that it's not this tool to achieve this performance? And the biggest theme, coming into this conversation, speaking with Erika and just thinking about, I've been doing a lot of deep diving lately on what all of those patterns were in my life. And that pattern of seeking validation and seeking that praise, even though it's like, it's weird to say that. There's some shame around that because you don't want to be like praised. Like, it's not like I'm sitting there wanting people to worship the ground I'm walking on, but like, that's what you feel this sense of just complete, like you're on guard because it's like, who's going to approve of this? And like, if they don't approve of this, then what does that mean about me? And then how do I navigate the world if I'm not being told what to do and if it's amazing or not? And so that was a really challenging time. And that I'm just now realizing a decade later that was so incredibly difficult to even grasp at all. Like that was the reality of what was going on.
Caroline, can I just intersect something you said so beautifully? Yeah. The difference between like connection to something or believing that you need the validation from others to feel connected to them, that is very linked with the word loneliness, right? Because we can be around a lot of people and always be having to read the room to see what they want from us, which was what was safe for you growing up as a swimmer and all of that. And then it's like, oh, what is important? It's like there's this flip of maybe how I feel less lonely just in the world is by looking at what is it that I'm connecting to that gives me purpose or meaning making. And it sounds like the fact that you just said all of that is really profound.
Well, and that's how that word pain comes to fruition in this conversation too. And it's so interesting because even having this conversation right now, I've probably had the most realizations in my life over the past 6-7 months than I have in the past decade at all, just because of that, because I'm realizing what I seeked out in order to feel connected, in order to feel validated, in order to feel loved, in order to feel accomplished. And it was chaos. It was pain. It was making things really difficult. It was the lack of safety. It's like all these things that weren't necessarily in my stream of consciousness. I was subconsciously seeking out in order to feel all those things. But really it was just this pile, like I was just becoming this like pile of mush because I didn't, it wasn't going anywhere. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy of how hard can something be? How painful can something be? Connecting over chaos. Like when things went wrong, I like could rise to the occasion. And it's like, it was bizarre how all of a sudden I could realize this.
So when the things you just described is the pain, the chaos, all that, was that more in your body, the pain? Sometimes when I think about pain in psychology, physically, it's because we're not doing our emotional work. We're avoiding one pain and substituting with another, like more of an external. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm like very into the somatic, how the mind and the body work together. And I started to realize it at about, 28 13, 14, I started experiencing injury after injury after injury. And of course, my, younger 20s-year-old mindset was thinking, I'm just injured. Like, it's fine, whatever. And then it just continued to happen. I broke my heel twice. I tore my hip labrum. I get some sort of septic knee situation and I'm in the hospital for 2-3 days, pumped up on medicine. And then I get this gnarly concussion. And on top of it all was dealing with this endless chronic fatigue and like stomach problems and gut issues and skin issues and all these things that was just piling on top of one another. And I kept initially just blaming physical things like, oh, well, it's all happening to me now because I was bulletproof when I was competing. Like I never had any problems. And then all of a sudden, that concussion really, it's kind of the old joke where it's like you get knocked over the head and you get sense knocked into you, you knock some sense into you, but it like woke up everything that was buried layers and layers deep first of all, concussions are very humbling. I don't make light of this at all, but it truly woke me up. And I started to realize, first of all, it kicked me into this dark depression, like the darkest yet, because I had been powering through all the other things. All of a sudden, I was completely standstill. Like I couldn't do anything. I was in bed for months. I couldn't get out of bed. My vertigo was horrible. It was just this. I think I actually had a session with you, Erika, during that time, or maybe it was like right during it or right before it. But it was all of a sudden, like everything woke me up, and I realized that all of the physical ailments that had been happening to me were a product of the emotional lack of safety and being in a sympathetic state, and my body and my adrenals and my whole system was like, just stop. I remember waking up to that feeling of like, this isn't just physical anymore. And then that's when I started to research and get into this whole, trauma and the body keeps the score, that book and all this. And I'm like, holy crap, like this has been manifested for like 10 to 15 years.
Good for you though. Body. Wow.
When all of that comes up, I was like crying every single day for weeks on end. And I couldn't explain myself to anyone. And I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to talk to people. I've just been avoiding and running and finding all of these things that can be so painful, but really it's all a manifestation of what I haven't healed now.
And Caroline, can you share a little bit about what somatic therapy can do with that? Because a lot of people don't know what that is.
Yes. It's a mind-body approach to healing. So it integrates work that you can do, such as EMDR and somatic breath work and tapping and all of these different physical things that you can do in sessions that can bring out emotion that you can then process through your body. So I worked with a woman out here that I would have sessions with her. And for example, she would stand across the room and she would come closer to me and I would have to tell her to stop when I wanted her to stop. And that was based on a trauma that I had in college. And I, like at the very beginning, for example, she would walk like kind of fast and I would like completely freak out and have to sit on the couch and be like, get away from me now. Like, please back up. But it was like she was able to finally get closer and closer to where I could like be okay with her right here. I'm kind of pointing like 12 inches in front of me and I would feel okay. But that took like a year. Your body tells you, I guess is like a centered way of speaking about somatic, is like your body will tell you if you're nervous and anxious before your brain can get to that spot. So you're working with your body to release what's pent up inside of it, to let it out.
I'm older than you, but I also just recently realized how important the body is. All of these signs and symptoms and expressions of our body are telling us things that we're not letting our mind tell us.
Communicating to ourselves of where the work is.
Like, listen to your body. Listen to your body.
Did you know, Caroline, when you're describing that beautiful example of her walking towards you, you knew it was related to a trauma in college. Did you know when your body gave you a sign, like what it was connected to, or how did that come out for you?
No, at first, no. And it takes a second for you to realize like what that's from. But it's interesting how she knew, just based on our conversation. So it's like blending the cognitive side of it because she can understand what that is and then hold that and then understand where it's being manifested. But I didn't know that. And I'm sure it comes from other things too, just even being a woman and having that, like us as women in society, it's like that's a scary feeling in the first place. But I'm sure that showed up for me even younger than college. So I learned a lot of tools that I just had never learned about how to regulate my nervous system, how to take a break and step back and breathe and, mindlessly walk or do some tapping exercises or things that would really regulate me, because I think that being an athlete too, I'm very kinesthetic. And so being able to use my body in that way was like a superpower that I was like, okay, I know how to do this, like I actually know what to do.
Was breath triggering for you? I know a lot of people can say, like, when I'm alone with my breathing, I get more anxiety. As a swimmer, breath is so important.
As a swimmer.
Like, what was different for you? How was breathing healing for you?
I mean, breath work is very opening. So if you're holding on to a lot of traumas or pent up tension, it will release it and feel like horrible. It does. And that's why a lot of people cry. You'll hear of women or men in yoga that will say, I was doing this heart opener and I started crying, or, you don't really know why, because I think when you can access a deeper part of your body, it allows that to come out. And to be honest, breath work's really hard for me when I'm just fine, quote unquote. Like if I have nothing, if I feel good and I'm like, oh, I just don't want to do it. Because I think sometimes I know that it's like a big release and it's exhausting sometimes. So, but it's funny how if I am activated or anxious or upset, like I want it. So it's interesting how when I'm okay, I don't want to do it. And when I'm not okay, I do want to do it. And so I think that's just part of the learning of like, what's the resistance there? What's the resistance to slowing down and calming down and being able to just be with yourself? Why does it only have to be when you're in pain?
I know you're an artist. Was the creativity element of that? We Sarah and I had an episode about kind of different ways to clear out and complete the stress response cycle internally, which is what you're describing, the crying, the breath, laughter even. Creativity is one of those. And I just thought it was really interesting when I was looking at your bio that where artist came in the picture of your course of flights. Can you talk a little bit about what you noticed about yourself when you got more connected with the creative or artistic part of your life?
Yeah, I started sketching again because I went to fashion school. I left that out. But we did a lot of sketching of the body, and you sketch a lot of fashion style sketches, but you learn how to be one with a body of some sort. So when I got that concussion, I honestly couldn't look at a screen. I was struggled doing most things for a while. So I started sketching again. And it was a way for me to integrate myself back with my body and feel like it was a tangible exercise for me to do that. And it was abstract and free, and I didn't care, what it looked like or felt like. I just did it. That was like right before I really started doing any of the somatic stuff. And that's when I got into it the most, was before all of that really started. And then I continued during it. But it helped me feel like I had an outlet that wasn't words or forced thoughts or, like having to label what I'm doing. Like I could just do it and it didn't have to have an outcome.
It didn't have to have an outcome. That's so fascinating. Because you're right. I mean, we know that creativity, especially drawing, is in that right hemisphere of the brain where the limbic system is, the emotion is, which is connected to where the body keeps trauma, right? Whereas the left brain is that frontal lobe and the language and the linear thinking and the logic, which you weren't relying on when you were doing art. You were tapping into that in a way that was safe. It was an outlet. But I love that you just said it didn't have to have an outcome. It's in the now.
Yeah, I think it's great too. You also said at the beginning, which I loved, there's no arrival, like with all your goals. And that's so great about creativity. There's no there's not always such a final destination of such a final goal.
Yeah. And I started to actually, I don't know, like a year ago, I started to feel that pressure, like it should have one. And so I stopped doing it. I was like, okay, I need to step back and just take a breather from this, because things can be fun. There can be joy in life. It doesn't have to be painful. And that's been like the goal of that.
And I think you hit on it earlier too, when you said like you working, whatever it is you're doing. For you, it was obviously becoming an Olympic athlete, which is, I mean, how many people get to say that? And then you've worked so hard for that you forget, and we've talked about this too, you forget how to use other parts of your brain. You have other skills.
Or even like the intensity of how young you were having to swim. I'm like, where was your inner child? Where was the fun then? You know, and the fact that you're connecting to the fun now.
Can you have fun swimming now? Is it fun again?
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I don't care. Like I love the pool, and I could care less about how much I do or what, you know, like we just play with a GoPro. Like we literally play with a GoPro, and it's really enjoyable. But it took me a long time to get there. I didn't get in a pool for like 5 years. But yeah, it's an interesting thing about even circling back to that pain, that word pain, like being able to know that things can be hard, and also I can have joy. Because I don't think that I've ever really understood that, like that both things can be true. I don't need to just have one thing that's true in life. It can be, yes, things can be hard and things can be enjoyable. It's very Brené Brown to talk about that, because so many people don't feel they deserve to be happy, that they just have to suffer. I think that message was ingrained in many different settings. I think life changes, but in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, that message was different than it is now. You know, like the generations are changing as it pertains to joy, and it's okay to have it.
Where do you connect to joy right now? In what way?
Nature, just being outside and going hiking, or even just walking like in a neighborhood. Like it doesn't have to be anything super fancy, but going to Colorado, like things like that, I get so much joy from, and I feel completely lost and immersed in that moment, to where I don't think about comparison and who's who and keeping up with the Joneses and this and that, and am I achieving, and is this hard enough, is this fun enough, or whatever I tell myself. So nature, you know, I could name the things like art and swimming for fun, and all that for sure brings me joy. But I think the most joy that I feel right now is resting.
Good for you.
And that sounds really, really weird, but like I can't tell you how exciting it is to be like, oh my gosh, I'm done with my day. It's 5:30. I'm done with dinner, and I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch Grey's Anatomy, because I started from season 1 and here we are. And it's like, I've just never had that feeling. Like it's never been fun for me to do that. I always rest feeling like I need to do more.
You didn't have the permission.
I didn't have the permission. And it was constantly like, what could I be doing right now instead of this?
I love it. But I do remember when we worked together, you know, Louisville, Kentucky is known for its gray months, you know, when it's not the Kentucky Derby, it is gray. And I remember that really affecting you then. We talked about that. Somebody who lives their life in a pool, and, you know, I know there's indoor stuff, but now you're in California. I love hearing that you're doing those hikes, and I can imagine the dappled sunlight is also resonating with your body. Your body needed that. And I'm so happy you're in an environment that supports that.
And I do carry a lot of guilt not living near family. And I think that's something that I still struggle with. I am so happy in environments with sun and that's probably what drew me to Florida, going there for college. I think I need that, like that feels like it brings the best out in me. I'm a different person completely.
Do you know the science in that? Do you know why?
I was going to ask you, I don't know how this doesn't affect everyone.
Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting. I love this, because so some of it's vitamin D that's like literally getting in our bodies and helping us. But if you think of like prehistoric times, right, that if people were out in dappled sunlight, they were either hunting, they were finding their tribe, they were well enough in their health and strength to kind of be living. When people were in the dark, they were in caves, they were often alone, they were sick, they were under rocks. You know, it was dark where they're more vulnerable to predators. So there is something in our, like the retina of our eyes, when we have that dappled light that releases dopamine, which is that signal, that chemical signal to keep going. So there's something really true about that, like just in terms of survival, that urges us to get out in that sunlight, to be seen, to survive.
That was really it. I don't know. I'm so adamant about that and how important it is to listen to that, because I do think that within our body, it can tell us what our patterns are. It can tell, like, just by recognizing what's going on with your body. And, you know, there's a million Instagram accounts with doctors that talk about this, or people that talk about this, and not just Instagram, but articles. And the way that we do live our lives emotionally does have an impact on all of these things. And again, I'm not saying it's like the reason, but I
symptoms are good things. They're signals to pay attention to, and they get louder when we don't. And I think it's easy to get scared of a symptom and brush it aside. It really requires courage to just be curious about, what is this telling me that's important? And sometimes we don't know.
Yes, and one thing that like we love to hear and explore, like going back to 2018, I think is when you said you had the concussion. I think this was a low point for you, a very hard time for you. What do you think were some of the first things that you did that you could tell even other women that are at a low point right now, whether it be a health situation or they're just realizing something has to change? What were some of the things that other people did, or you learned from other people, or you just read on your own? Like, does anything come to mind?
Yeah. Awesome question. I think the first thing is awareness. Becoming aware of what it is that you're experiencing is 90% of the battle. I think when we avoid it, it can get easy to just let things pile up. But awareness, and healthy awareness, because it's easy also to be like, oh my God, I have 800 problems. This is horrible. Let me list them all out. Like, yes, that's real. And I did the same thing, but I think it's like a healthy awareness of like, something isn't right. I have constant migraines, or my stomach's always hurting. I have eczema. I'm anxious. I'm having panic attacks, or whatever it is. Because finding the right professionals to help was game changing for me. I'm big on finding a functional medicine doctor that can help, and also a therapist or some sort of practitioner emotionally and mentally that can help. And there's so many different routes people take now with all of this, but those two things changed my life in conjunction with one another. I know it's I wish that our healthcare covered everything in America, but that's a story for another day. But I know it's a lot, and I just dove in and went for it, because I knew that was the rest of my life. And I wanted to make sure that was like something that I was able to heal. But that would be my first thought. And if you have to choose one, just go with what feels, you know, the most important to you in that moment. If you're like, I just need someone to talk to about these things, then that's really important. And if you're like, something is definitely physically, I need to get my blood work done, like this doesn't feel good. I'm a big blood work fan, and going deep, like getting all of the autoimmune IgB panels, like all of the adrenal, kidney, liver, like not just the thyroid and estrogen. Like you got to go deeper, and it is more, but it's worth it. So those things were really helpful for me, because I was just using it as information.
You created a flock of people who could collaborate and show up for you and help you have that deeper awareness, because you didn't have that expertise. So turning towards others that can help is survival too.
Yeah, I love too what you said about how when you're in the deepest struggle, sometimes you don't want to talk about it. It's very hard. I'm obsessed with like knowing what people have done to come out of a struggle. And what you just said about the awareness to know that something has to change is just so poignant. And because we had talked before, like, what happens if you don't do something? Like, what is going to happen? I mean, I say women, but, all humans, like, what happens if you don't find a way out of that lowest point of your life? And I've been there. I've found ways out. You obviously have. And I just think it's so important to give women these resources of everything that you're saying, Caroline, like books and finding your flock, like you mentioned, like whether it's functional medicine, a therapist. It's so important to get the word out to people who aren't ready to quite talk about the struggle that they're in, but that there are pathways out. There's a flight out.
Don't give up.
If we can,
something that is easy to do, and I'm not at all like bashing the health industry or anything like that. I don't even know if bashing is the right word, but I'm not at all saying that you shouldn't collect information. But something that I was told in the process of healing is like, okay, if you're not going to do therapy, if you're not going to do functional medicine, and those things are just too costly at this moment, try to find and research and do your own research for what books or things that you can start to kind of trial and error and test out, knowing that A, it's not going to work right away. Don't give up. Like, it gets worse before it gets better too. And B, don't over soak the sponge to where you can't absorb anything. Like, there's so much out there now that can be quite exhausting to try and figure out what path to take or what to learn about yourself. So slow and steady, like, you're not going to change it overnight.
Right.
I mean, hell, I just now got rid of a parasite, and it's many years later, like that was in my body. So, you go through different phases of healing, and it took years to get to that point.
I bet.
I do think it's just worth people hearing that it's not going to happen in 2 months.
Right. I like what you said about looking for things that are financially feasible for everyone. That's something that's near and dear to us as well. From your journey since 2008, is there a book that sticks out in your mind maybe to recommend?
Gosh, I have several. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. I think it's Peter Levine.
Yes, yep. Waking the Tiger.
So really and truly, any book by Peter Levine, Professor Van der Kolk, or Dr. Gabor Mate are like my 3 go-to people in that field. And yes, they're all men, but that's fine.
That's okay.
And I actually got to go see Dr. Gabor Mate speak. And he's just this tiny little guy who has these little blue glasses, like in his 70s, maybe 80s now. But he was the most profound speaker that I've listened to on this topic, because he was able for us to see that, like, all of our problems are like, we're not broken. We're just, if you're an addict, if you've been traumatized, if you've been in, horrible situations, like, you're not broken. Your responses are a byproduct of these things that have happened that have gone unhealed. And so when you can really see it from that lens, like every homeless person walking around, or everyone that's like, I live in Los Angeles, I see it all the time. I look at them differently now, and they're not broken, or they don't deserve to be shamed for what they're going through.
The small word of like fix versus heal is like so powerful. I mean, so many clients in my office will just casually say, what can I do to fix this? And it's like that insinuates something's broken versus like this whole compassionate perspective of healing. It's more collective of we can help each other.
And what words are so important.
Yeah, and I agree, because it's easy to get stuck in the fix game. Just tell me how to fix it. And, instead of tell me how to change my relationship with it, which I think has been game changing for me to realize, like, I'm not broken. I don't need to have to suffer.
Can I ask you back to one of your careers when you were in your company mentoring young athletes? Because you've obviously been on an amazing journey of, all the inner work. Could you talk a little bit maybe how you mentored these young athletes that you did not get when you were a young athlete, of how you had to kind of change that scene for young, maybe particularly young women?
That's a good question. There's so many different things with teens right now that they're going through that are different than when I grew up. I mean, we didn't even have phones. So that says it right there. I think we had AOL Instant Messenger, and that was the extent of it. A lot of the time, they're just looking to be heard. And I think that theme in itself was the most profound theme
Mm.
that I experienced, and that the rest of our coaches at Rise experienced. And we had 50 some odd coaches, and the conversations that we would have as a team together was like, we don't need to fix anything. Like, what they're looking for is different than what we were taught growing up. Like, we were taught to just fix it. What we need to do in order to make the changes now is not provide this like band-aid, but provide this listening ear so that they can process and talk about what they're experiencing and it be okay. It's not, you can provide feedback, of course, and say, okay, is this the gremlin, or is it, to the young ones, we'd call them gremlins. Like, is this the gremlin telling you this, or is this the angel? Like, which one is it that's telling you this? And, you provide feedback that can be tough love in a way that is nurturing, but it's not fixing, if that makes sense.
Connection is the cure, and being seen or heard with connection, not feeling alone in the world, is so powerful.
And that was really the biggest realization I had about even my life now, but also my life then. Like, if only I could have felt that same level of like, someone's just listening. Not every conversation needs to have a solution. And I think that was a giant like realization, not every conversation needs to have a solution. Sometimes they can just be conversations to hear someone out and just thank them for sharing.
That's, as a parent,
really, I took that straight to my parenting.
Parenting, right? I mean,
that hurt. That went real deep in me.
Well, I'm still learning it, I mean, even in the relationship that I just spoke about, the boyfriend that I was with for several years, that was able, it was a beautiful relationship. The biggest thing I learned from that is not every conversation needs to have a solution. There's just a way to feel seen. And sometimes without a solution, it allows the person that's going through the issue to figure it out for themselves.
There's also something really powerful about the courage it takes to sit with someone we care about in their pain. It's like, would be much more easy for me to help you figure out what you're going to say to your friend at the playground tomorrow than sit with you while you're feeling so sad. But that's where the healing happens. But it takes courage. It's like the closer the more care you have for someone, sometimes the harder that is.
I feel the same way. Like, I always want to be like the cheerleader, hopping in and helping. And that's it's a genuine thing. You want to help, but it was my discomfort with not having something to figure out in that moment, and something to achieve, and something to like do. And it's okay to sit with somebody, like you said, when they're in pain and not know what to say, and just sit.
You're not judging them when you're sitting there in silence. You're a compassionate witness of their experience.
Yeah. That is great.
Caroline, we are so appreciative of your time. I know that you've probably got a million other things to do, like Grey's Anatomy and your sofa.
No.
And I'm just kidding. But this has been so valuable, and I know you have touched so many people at their different kind of courses of their life flight, whether they're teenagers or 30s, 40s, 50s, men, women, everybody. It's all relatable to all of us. And you've shared it in such a raw, honest way that I know takes courage too. So we really, really appreciate it.
I just also want to say, I cannot wait to see more of Caroline Burkle. Like, you're so young. You're an amazing person. Mm-hmm. You really are. You're really fiery. And no pressure about the sabbatical, but like.
It's been such a lesson to sit with like nothingness.
How great to like be able to take a break after this and think about things.
We always like to ask our guests, where are you on your life flight right now? And I think you just described like the layover. Is this where we are? Like, where are you right now?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm on my layover. I think some days I rapidly pace the airport trying to get more steps in, and the next day I'm laying down eating something bad for me and just relaxing. And I think it's an uncomfortable place to be, but I think innately I know that I will always want to create and achieve. And I need to realize that this time is teaching me why, that I'm not doing it for validation. I want to do it because I want to for myself. Mm-hmm. And
I'm so happy for you.
I am too. And even people, and here I am, I'm like, well, I can't wait for the next. I mean,
well, it's human too. And you can daydream about what's next and still stay in the moment. I mean, it's not like one's good or bad. Right. And, but talking about doing that is one thing, but actually doing it and living it is really impressive.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I figure I have a lot to learn.
You can come back on another time and we can talk more. We'll be able to hop on this plane.
So our second final question is usually where are you flying next?
Actually, I do know that I am flying to see my family in March. My brother's having a surgery, so we're going to Houston, I believe. So I do know I'm doing that, which I'm actually pretty excited for. It's nice to see family when you're not in Louisville too. It's like there's an interesting dynamic with that. Yeah, I don't know. I want to take a fun trip physically, but I don't know where.
Good. I love Erika and Sarah. I really get living in the now vibes from you, and I appreciate that. You're an inspiration, whether you like it or not.
Well, you all are too, and I really appreciate you having me on.
That's always meaningful.
Yeah, I absolutely love getting to know you.
Thank you so much, Caroline.
Well, I love that conversation. I love how she talked about all of her work, her inner work. So nice to hear people who've done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd have to say overall, her word was pain, but I would say the takeaway that seems to be sort of the through line in all of her different, not just her pain, like physically, but her awareness of what was happening, not only during the time, but also when she could reflect back on seeing how it all connected. I feel like, awareness sometimes feels like obvious, like I should know what to do next as awareness, but she talked about it in a way that was much more about permission to be aware of what's happening inside of me, being curious about what that's telling her, even if it's in the form of pain, but how to listen to it and use it to heal rather than try to either fix it or escape it.
Yeah, I also think for me, I mean, I'm not a therapist, obviously, but it takes a person you have to get to that place to develop the awareness. Like she was saying, like she had a concussion. Like I don't know how you can shorten that journey. You have to get to that awareness.
Well, that's the whole point of learning it now, is that if you listen to symptoms, you don't get to the breakdown. It's like
stopping the train before it totally goes off the rails.
Exactly. If we knew, this stuff wasn't taught to us growing up. Like how if we knew how it could be healing, even just listening to somebody else or listening to ourselves, that awareness is worthy of care, and then we can decide what the next step is. But you're right. I mean, most of us,
it's almost like you hit rock bottom.
Yeah, and she said that like it's almost like addiction, where you almost have to hit that, or you don't.
Right.
But at what point does the awareness prevent you from going to rock bottom?
Yes, I totally agree with all that. Like you don't have to get let's start paying attention to the symptoms. I mean, I've had nocturnal panic attacks. That's where my anxiety often manifests. What could I have noticed before? Before starting to have those.
It comes back to that internal stress response cycle, because when you're asleep, your conscious brain is at rest and your subconscious is trying to finish all the business.
Right.
And that's where that comes out. If the stress cycle is there, it's like she said that when she was doing breath work, like she would start crying. It's like everything was coming out when it could, which is in a lot of ways great. It's uncomfortable, but her body's like, get this out. I mean, she had a parasite. Like that's so fascinating.
I love this through line of body awareness. Gosh.
I mean, it's fascinating how yoga and practices over time, rituals of the body work were being done way before we knew how it was helpful. But it all comes back to awareness of our bodies, and that it's not always neck up where the problems are solved.
Join us for another episode. We'll be back next time with a new word and another psychological takeaway. If you want to discover more about us or the psychological takeaway, follow us on socials, and the links are in the show notes.
Okay. Good to see you.
You too.
Please be advised that anything on this podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek qualified healthcare help if you feel at all triggered.
Hee hee.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, that's on. Don't touch that.